Ladies and gentlemen, podcast listeners of all ages, are you bored with traditional and dull real estate content?
Yes!
Do you want to be entertained by the most successful, innovative, and forward-thinking industry professionals?
Yes!
Do you want to elevate your business, be challenged to take action, and raise the bar in your personal and business dojo?
Yes!
Now welcome your ninja host, Jeff Fitzer.
Okay, welcome back to the Real Estate and Mortgage Content Ninja podcast. I am very excited today to have a pretty awesome guest. This man is the founder of CallAction, which is a lead engagement automation platform. Welcome to the show, Jesse. And I don't even want to try to butcher your last name, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself. We'll go from there.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. It's Jesse Beaudoin. I've heard every combination of that possible, so don't worry.
So it was safer to go with nothing.
Exactly. Jesse B is probably the safest route that most people will go with.
I like it. Awesome. Jesse, so tell us a little bit, first of all, about your background, where CallAction came from, and then let's talk about how it can benefit an agent or mortgage person's business.
Sure, no problem. Well, a little backstory from me. Got started in the real estate and mortgage space a little while ago, back in 1987. My first job ever, I was a telemarketer for a mortgage company and just kind of fell in love with the business. Got licensed when I was 18 years old. Went to go try and sell some real estate, but when I went door knocking, the guy's like, "Hey, you look like you're about 12. I don't think you should, be selling my house." So I went back into the mortgage business, and then I was just smart, right? Because we're good with numbers. Did that until forever, pretty much. What I learned pretty quick in my industry was just that I enjoyed when people called me instead of me calling them. So I became a student of marketing. And what I just found through that is I just kind of discovered direct mail, studied all the famous guys, Cialdini, all the famous copywriters, because early on in early 90s, direct mail was about it. Then in the mid 1990s, started playing around with something called WinFax, which was pretty interesting, and doing some faxing to try and generate some inquiries. And then in 1997, I had the aha moment where I was driving, going fishing with my pops, and we were listening to the radio, and there was the Netscape IPO. And Netscape, well, for those of you that might not know, it was the very first internet browser. And I just heard about this company going, from 0 to 100 million or something in one day, which today is nothing, but back then was pretty substantial IPO raise. And that got me thinking about the internet. And I started buying domain names, got pretty good at generating online leads. And in 2002, 2003, pretty much got out of the mortgage business because I was generating so many leads and just reselling that back out to Quicken Loans and Lending Tree and a couple of other companies like that specialize in buying online mortgage leads. From there, lived in Argentina for a year, took my kids down there, put them in school, and kind of came back. And combination of all of this kind of studying of the internet, having boots on the ground in online lead gen, also working those online lead gen leads became the impetus of what's now basically CallAction.
Wow. So let me backtrack a couple of places.
Sure.
So first of all, and I'm gonna get personal, but I'm also gonna stay on track here, just because I'm always fascinated about people's backgrounds. But
no problem.
First of all, 1997 you mentioned, and then 2002, and you were selling leads to these companies that are today the drivers of the lead gen business, essentially, right? I mean,
exactly.
So essentially, maybe I'm saying this incorrectly, but you were out ahead of those guys. That's pretty damn impressive.
I had some websites before Lending Tree came out, and I remember it like it was almost like it was yesterday, it seemed like. When I started thinking about the internet, I really thought about it from the consumer's point of view. And this concept, basically the internet was like a library. And how would I go into a library and find the information that I was looking for? So I started buying what we called back then exact match domain names around certain keywords. So I was able to get sites to rank pretty quickly. And then every year I attend a conference called Inman Connect. Again, always trying to be a student of what the future was going to be and constantly learning. Inman Connect, this guy named Doug Ledba, he came up on the stage and, he's like, hey, I'm founding this company called Lending Tree. It's banks compete, you win. And Brad Inman had asked him, how many deals have you guys done? And he said something like 5. And the crowd kind of chuckled and kind of laughed. But, within the next couple of years, that company became a beast. And in the mortgage space, it really affected us because, you had this full transparency, banks compete, you win, became about service, less about relationships. And as I kind of went through that entire process, what I learned in the future is really this is what's affecting real estate agents today. But yeah, it was definitely pretty early on. I had secured a lot of those, top spots just from going to SEO conferences and figuring out the algorithms and how to generate basically leads at little or no cost, because most of my stuff was all organic search, basically.
I mean, this was damn near prehistoric times in just the internet age in general.
Yeah, it was pretty early on. Really, the internet had been around since 1993 in some early forms. But Netscape, the browser, made the www kind of accessible to everyone. That's the beginning of the internet being super accessible. Domains were a little bit earlier before that. If I would have been smarter, I would have bought some of those bigger ones like Coke and Pepsi. But
hindsight is 2020 on that, right?
Yeah, exactly. The rearview mirror is clearer than the windshield.
100%. So, and I'm going to bounce around here. And then you decided to move to Argentina, and without maybe opening a can of worms here, why Argentina? Why a year? Why to put your kids in school? I assume that had something to do with your success. What happened there?
Yeah, so my daughter was getting ready to go into high school, and my son was a little bit younger. My wife had been a corporate person, and we were both just kind of things had been doing well. And I had made a personal goal to try and pay off my first house. And once I accomplished that, then I said, well, let's, spin the wheel basically. And we just picked Argentina because we wanted to live in a big city where we can walk around, put our kids into a foreign school to expose them to being better at adaptability, because I feel we kind of live them, we raise them in a way in a society right now where they're a little overprotected. And I thought kind of putting them out there in the mix, learning Spanish and everything was good. And then, as a family unit, just going somewhere where nobody at all is just a great way to just kind of bond as a family and really spend time with one another. So
that's cool.
So that's kind of the impetus of that. And then just kind of clear our minds because, you got one life, you got to live it.
100%. Life is short. You got to take advantage of it. So at that point, did you take a year off from working altogether, or were you continuing to progress with what you're doing today? Yeah,
I was just progressing with what I was working on. I got involved pretty tightly with the startup scene down in Argentina, and being someone that was from California and stuff, it was pretty easy to have some conversations because, it was super, super ahead in terms of what they were doing down there. And having an internet business, and especially that kind of business, it was really easy to run that from anywhere. There was basically no customer service. All I was looking for was, our leads being sent over to these companies and his money being deposited into an account. And that was pretty much it. So it's the ultimate kind of lifestyle business. Not anything for me to build a real substantial company like what we're trying to do now with, CallAction. That was purely just straight lifestyle, just create freedom, and that's it. So
awesome. Now that we've laid the groundwork that you are essentially a guru / expert / the guy to talk to about lead engagement and automation, let's dive a little bit deeper in. So your background is in the mortgage business. You said something earlier that would resonate with all of us in the real estate and mortgage industry, which is, I like the phone to ring. I like people to call me. And so that is the golden goose. How do we perfect that? How do we improve that? Talk to us about CallAction. And I assume it's pretty broad based, but talk to me about why this is something, or go back to the basics of what CallAction does for us in our business.
I'll lay down the initial groundwork in terms of why inbound is so much easier and why it's so important to have a good foundation of inbound leads versus chasing all of the time. Because as salespeople, we're basically human. And what happens is consistency is key. all of the most successful businesses in the world, if you think of any kind of franchise model, the core out of all of these is consistency, whether it's consistency in product, consistency in quality and communication and branding, in response, in an experience. And as salespeople, the hardest part for us is to create consistency. And if you're a salesperson who's got to go out and develop relationships and chase after the business, the consistency kind of ebbs and flows, basically. And this is why so many people in real estate struggle, is that, we don't have that consistency in our lives. So you got to complement that with marketing that ideally is going to generate inbound so that you have that consistency. Consistency and follow-up is also the other biggest problem, because right now, if we look at companies like, Zillow, if you're on the real estate side, or Lending Tree on the mortgage side, or any of these other kind of lead gen companies that are selling leads, you can create consistency in terms of leads and having that ability. But again, what happens, it comes back full circle. That's only one part of the consistency that is solved, which is basically lead flow. Chasing after it, or converting those leads, still requires consistency and follow-up. And that was really the impetus of CallAction. What we found, and just kind of my journey through all of this stuff, is that time has kind of changed. Before, we used the internet in a very specific way, which was, we had a laptop computer or a desktop computer. You would log into your cabled internet, and at night, basically, you would, instead of watching TV, you might sit behind the computer and do some research about products and services that you might be interested in. So it made a lot of sense to fill out a form, which is what, in all essence, all leads are today, is just these form fills. But now, as time has progressed, and we're really in a mobile first world, because, the iPhone is basically 10 years, and there's 240 million iPhones floating around. There's only 300 million people in the United States. And so the vast majority of people, their primary internet access now is a mobile phone. And the form factor, in other words, the size of the device and the screen and the keyboard, has changed our behavior. So instead of filling out forms like crazy now, which we'll still do, if it's late at night, also when searching patterns kind of revert back to, an iPad or a laptop nowadays. But if we're searching during the day, or when we have peak state of interest, then we're typically not only are we going to fill out a form, but we're usually going to just hit the call button. And this is, the core foundational change of what has taken place in terms of our industry, is that the phone has created this insatiable desire for instant gratification. And what will happen is, we're going to use the internet or use the mobile device to search until it can no longer answer the question for us. In real estate, what that typically is, if we're, using, let's say, Zillow or Redfin or any of those kind of mobile apps, is that we could press a button that's going to tell us all of the properties that are close to us. So there's not really even a search function as much anymore. We can filter that search down, but really we're almost getting push notifications of the properties that interest us the most. But at the end of all of that stuff, if I am very motivated and I have this peak state of interest, because all of friends and family have been telling you the hardest part of buying a home is finding the right home, and when you do, you better jump on it. We're starting to see this trend where people will just hit the click to call button, and they're trying to get a hold of an agent as quickly as possible. In the mortgage business, it's still fairly similar. It's, if they need to get pre-qualified because they did find a house and now all of a sudden they got to move quickly, they're going to pick up the phone and maybe call. What we're finding is that although everybody has a mobile phone, nobody can speak to each other, because if we don't recognize the caller ID, we don't pick up. We live in this life of interruption. So that was really the core impetus, is that transition from form fills, in other words, people filling out forms late at night, to what we're starting to see, this kind of click to call. There's a company out there called BIA Kelsey, which is kind of like a Forrester research bit on small business and local advertising. And what they found is, since the introduction of the iPhone, or really kind of the click to call button, that has gone from 0. And this year we're going to be north of 160 billion phone calls made from click to call. If you just think of your own behavior, like, you do a search on Google Maps, there's a click to call button. You're not going to go to the website to make a dinner reservation. You're just going to hit the click to call button. So it's almost like we're coming full circle back with voice to voice communication.
I see that. So I see that stat. And I have a question about that though. So you're talking about how, and it kind of goes against what everybody says, and maybe this is trending another direction, but they talk about the millennial generations and the younger generations don't want to be bothered with phone calls. They don't want to pick up the phone and make a phone call. They want to text or they want to message. Talk to me about why whatever you're telling us is kind of the opposite of that trend that you always hear about, where the younger generations want everything to be mobile because they don't want to be bothered.
There's some statements in that are correct. It's the timing of the phone call that is different. So if you think of, like, let's say using the internet, what's beautiful about it is it's on your own terms. I can search whenever I want to search. And if you think of mobile apps like, let's say, Uber or Airbnb and things like that, it's the same kind of thing. I can search whenever I want to search. But when I press the call button to order a car, think of that behavior of like how anxious we feel just watching that stupid little car showing up, 3 to 5 minutes, and we feel like it's taking forever. So what we're seeing with the millennials is they don't like calls just for call's sake. What they want is when they want service, then they want it immediately. It's just this immediate gratification of when I'm tired of trying to read through and trying to find answers or texting back and forth, then I want a phone call and you better answer. And this is kind of not just millennials, but this is just across the board. The one trend that I do think with millennials is that their desire for high levels of service and their expectation is actually significantly higher than all of the previous generations, because they've lived in a time of instant gratification the whole entire time.
Sure.
So, when they want it, they want it. And they still do want calls because they like that positive reinforcement that they're making the correct decision.
That is the participation trophy generation is what that is, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some of that, but it's just easy to have grown up in a time where, you have instant access to information. And when you don't understand it, you want someone to translate it for you instantly. Having that accessibility to that's what they're looking for.
So that makes sense. So obviously, if I'm interested in a product or service, and let's stay obviously true to what we're talking about here, which is real estate and mortgages, you're right. If I'm going on a website and just browsing and just searching for homes, for example, I'm not necessarily interested in talking to anybody yet. And that's where I guess I'm trying to get to connect the dots here, because you're 100% right. If I'm calling a business, I expect not only an answer, but I expect what I need to hear, what I was looking for. I expect execution. But when you're talking about Zillow leads or you're talking about Lending Tree, it seems to me, and I am no lead expert by any means, at least from the feedback that I get, is most of the time leads are crap, right? Because those people aren't really that interested. So obviously, if somebody calls, your service is going to give them the response that they expect. However, where is the connection between like a Zillow where, like you say, these people just don't seem all that interested, or you're calling on them and you call 50 of them to land one phone call?
Yeah, so there's a difference here. What we need to think about is the foundation of filling out that form. When someone fills out a form, we'll use Zillow for sake of conversation. If they fill out a form on Zillow, the task that they're trying to accomplish is to see the house. They're not looking for an agent. If they're filling out a Lending Tree application, the task that they're trying to accomplish is learn the rate or figure out if they're qualified. And they're usually doing this task in a very short amount of time, almost kind of on a whim. In other words, they're not fully committed, which is part of the reason why they're filling out the form. And it might oftentimes be a little bit later at night or in between stuff that they're doing. Because if you think of the way that we use the internet, we use it in between everything else, right? We use it to kill time. If you're standing in line at Starbucks, you pull out your phone because you can't be distracted. And with the design of mobile apps and stuff like that, it makes it easy to fill out an inquiry right at that moment in time. So when we call back, first and foremost, we need to do this in minutes if possible. There's an old MIT study that showed that it was 5 minutes or less was 300% lift in conversion. But the reality is that's kind of been updated. And now it's a minute or less really is where we need to be. And the reason why is that the average person gets 85 text messages per day. If you think about that, that's one about every 6 minutes. So we live in this time of distraction. And our attention span has gone way, way down. So the moment that I fill out that form, I might have peak state of interest, but 5 minutes later, you get a Facebook alert, a text message, a phone call, and you're totally distracted now and kind of off kilter. So even if you're calling back and trying to follow up with them, the trick is just to try and catch that person when they have that mental bandwidth, when they're thinking about that at their peak state of interest. So speed to lead, to convert leads, meaning responding back instantly, works because you're catching that person in that moment in time when they're still thinking about that and it's still fresh. But 5 or 6 minutes later, that attention span now can be completely diverted into something else. So then we need to kind of follow up over time to try and get to the bottom of that. I do agree it's not like a referral, right? But if you think of a referral from friends and family or something like that, the intent is totally different. The intent is someone said, I'm looking for a real estate agent or I'm looking for a good lender. So when you call back and say, I was referred by so-and-so, you're exactly accomplishing the task that they set out to accomplish. But if I filled out a form saying that I want to see a house and you're a real estate agent that's calling that person back, and then you start hitting them up in your scripting of, do you have a real estate agent? Have you been pre-qualified? Or are you doing all these things? The only thing they're thinking about mentally is like, all I want to do is just see the house, right? They're not looking for an agent. And so that differentiation just requires adaptability in terms of our scripting to really adopt it today. A lot of people, the biggest mistakes that they're making is instead of making this service and understanding the task that that person is trying to accomplish is that, we're all tuned into WIFM, what's in it for me, and basically trying to, get them as a lead. The other thing that is happening in today's behavior too, and we saw this happen with Lending Tree really early on. Real estate agents are starting to deal with this with Zillow because basically Zillow is Lending Tree for real estate. But what ended up taking place is at first the Lending Tree leads were really good. People would, be really interested in getting that best deal. So they were open to communication. But as competition, more people bought those leads, you become a victim of your own success. More people buy the leads. So then people get more aggressive in terms of following up with those leads and acting quickly. And those leads are being sold multiple times. So then what would end up happening is all of a sudden their phones would blow up. They would just get bombarded by, 10, 15, 20 people. So then they just stop answering to everybody. They turtle basically because you're like, whoa, this is way more than I bargained for. And this is starting to happen with Zillow. We're starting to see the trend where everyone's saying the quality is not as good. They're harder to get a hold of. There's more fake information. And this is just a learned behavior, right? You stick your finger in the fire once, bad on me. Stick it in there twice, shame.
Yeah.
The old adage basically. So what we're starting to see is just this, that people, you have to be a little bit more sophisticated. And so what happens is the initial speed to lead where you're going to convert 3%, 1 to 3% of those leads from just being at the right place at the right time. The real business or real money and all of this happens in the lead nurture, that long-term follow-up, 1 month to 12 months out, because most people are going to tire out after 1, 2, maybe 3 attempts of follow-up. And then after that, they just say, oh, this lead is not that good. And then they fall off. What people will do basically is if you reach back out to those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months later and start kind of showing back up again with that consistency in your follow-up, all of a sudden your lead conversion starts to explode. Because if you bought 100 leads, a fair expectation would be to convert, 2 to 3% of those leads in the next 1 to 4 months. 100 leads, you're going to get a couple closings, but there's 98 leads that require really long-term closing. And if you do an audit off of those old leads, you'll find that anywhere between 20 to 40% of those leads will have moved. So there's another, 20 to 50 leads that are in there that you got to work basically. And if you work those with consistency, That's where the ROI off of lead gen or buying leads is really going to take place. And that's kind of what CallAction is really focused on, is the full life cycle of that lead. Initially capturing those phone calls, responding to those phone calls if you don't personally, and then allowing you to build these long-term follow-up campaigns using text messaging, voicemail, directive voicemail drops, some video text. With the full combination of those different communication channels, then it feels very authentic. And then that's where you get the big wins in terms of long-term lead follow-up. So
awesome. So let's talk real estate agent or mortgage or both.
Okay.
Let's just say, I am investing in leads and I want to integrate this in. So basically, this is a way for the busy salesperson to be automated to where they're not going to miss a beat, correct?
Exactly. So if you kind of think about it, all of us always say that, man, I wish there was more of me, right? Or I need two of me, or clone myself, or whatever it might be. So the general idea, and I'll just kind of walk you through a workflow in terms of, whether this is online lender or basically a real estate agent. The concept on both of those is that someone is going to fill out a form. These are typically the leads that you're buying, or these form fills. And with CallAction, the way that we look at it is all advertising that you do, online, offline, digital, print, it doesn't matter. It all ends up into three primary forms of communication, which is going to be a phone call, an email, or a text message. So what we do is we give you a phone number that is text enabled and also has an email attached to it. And each phone number runs each one of your marketing campaigns. And this is how we can track and respond accordingly to each one of those lead sources. So if you buy an online form fill, you would send that online lead into the CallAction email address that is associated with the phone number that you're going to use to make the outbound communication. So email comes in, we parse out the information or extract the information from that form fill. And then what we'll do is we'll look for a name, a phone number, and an email in there. We extract that data, we drop that into your CRM to eliminate basically any data entry.
And are you talking any CRM? It can talk to any CRM?
The vast majority, yes, because if they have a Zapier integration or APIs, on the real estate side, we've got about 20, 25 different API integration. On the mortgage side, we tend to do them using Zapier. But yes, we can basically populate the data directly into the vast majority of the CRMs. So we create consistency in building your database. This is kind of, one of those first consistency models, because if you have the data in your CRM, you want to mine through that over time. So then what we'll do is once we've extracted that data, you're going to do a personalized text message from you. So it might be something like, "Hi, it's Jeff. I just got your email. I'm on another call right now. What's the best time for us to set up an appointment?" And so it creates this consistency that seems like it's coming from you. We delay that about a minute and a half or so that way it seems authentic and not automated. Because, you don't want like that thank you email after you fill out a form. So that's why we delay the text message a little bit. And then we'll send that text message. And then what that will do is it'll start the engagement or start that communication channel. If the person responds and gives you a time or something like that to respond to that, then you can just pick up the reins at that point and start to fill in. That makes the handoff over to you so that way you can start the communication. You can also use our system to build a fully automated long-term follow-up. So if they don't respond to the first message or the second message, it could keep going out very, very long-term. So we could do stuff where, you can send a text message, within minutes of it being received. 10 seconds later, we like to do these things we call these double texts, because this is how humans really text, is usually send multiple texts kind of back to back. And one of those second texts we'll send will be your V card or all of your contact information. And then maybe the next day at 9:15 in the morning, we'll do a directive voicemail drop. And since you can kind of pick the time that voicemail is going to be delivered, you can record a highly personalized message. It could be something like, "Hi, this is Jeff. Yesterday, I got your inquiry from Zillow. I sent you a couple text messages. It's about 9:15 in the morning. Please go ahead and give me a call back when you have a chance." And that feels very authentic because every step of that follow-up is reinforcing the previous follow-up step. So you're talking about the time that the lead came in, the couple text message attempts that you made, And now you're referencing the date and time or the time in the morning that that message is being delivered. So they feel that it is basically you. So this is where we're cloning you in a perfect world and giving you consistency to this basically follow up across these different text message and voice communication channels, which have the highest rate of conversions. Just some interesting facts. 97% of text messages are read in 3 minutes or less, and over 95% of text messages are responded to. So, that's going to be your primary form of engagement in today's time. In the past, we used to use, email, and email still works great, but it's very dependent upon the demographic of your customer. If you're buying leads in an area where, you work in an area where there's lots of business people who live on the email works great. But if you're, maybe in an area where it's a little bit more blue collar and people are doing physical labor and maybe not as active on email, an email, follow-up sequence is not going to be as effective to them because they're not checking the device. They're not checking their email as frequently as we do. So really, the right message to the right person at the right time. This is the foundation of lead gen and conversion and advertising as a whole, as direct response advertising. And that's all that we're trying to do is just right place, right message, right time with the consistency so that way you're always handling basically inbound. Because a typical salesperson, if you think of our life cycle, right, we spend maybe 80% of our time chasing after those conversations, doing these outbound tasks, meaning, picking up the phone, making an outbound phone call, leaving a voicemail, sending a text message, maybe, sending an email, and then going into our CRM, pushing that task back 2 or 3 days just to wake up again to repeat that, rinse and repeat. And what happens is over time, we just get overwhelmed because that task list usually grows faster than we can take things away off of that task list. And so we get inconsistency in using the CRM. So the way that we looked at it was, how can we remove that friction and, make it so that someone ultimately can stay in flow, right? And flow in sales is basically in conversation with people trying to put deals together and coming from a place of contribution and answering their questions and developing rapport and trust. And so if we can keep someone in that zone for hours during the day handling inbound, then you can do significantly more volume. Because once you've established that trust and rapport and everything else, you can actually outsource all of the rest behind the transaction. If it's in the mortgage side of things, you can have, your processor help you collect all of the documentation, or maybe hire, a personal assistant for you to walk them down through the rest of the processing of that file. In real estate, you can have a buyer's agent that's going to show those properties and things like that. In sales, what we really earn our commission on is that ability to develop trust and rapport and relationship. Once we've established that, then we have accomplished our goal and technically have earned our commission. The rest is just tasks that need to be accomplished, before or after that establishment of trust. And so the more that you can spend your time doing that in conversations and have more conversations, the more relationships you can build, the more trust that you can build. When you have trust, then you can outsource. And that's the way we kind of look at it.
Right on. So you and I discussed prior to, this call was a couple of examples, and we had mentioned a couple of different options. One was mortgage related, one was real estate related. And I want to give the listeners an example of how they could use this. And one of them we talked about was for a mortgage professional, for a loan officer, was converting leads on behalf of real estate agents.
Correct. We're starting to see this trend where, initially we had lots of loan officers. When Zillow kind of came out, one of their ways that they were funding the lead spend was to do a 50-50 lead spend between real estate agents and the lenders. And Zillow would go out and coach basically their real estate agents, say, hey, you have a lender partner, go and talk to that person and see if they're willing to pay for 50% of your lead spend so that way you guys can create a win-win scenario together. And so this fueled a lot of the Zillow growth and, some of these really big lead spends. In the past, what would happen is, lenders would just cut the check and, let the real estate agent and hopefully their team follow up with those leads. And then once it was ready, they would flip that back. And maybe sometimes both of you would try and work those leads. But we're starting to see a trend now where we have some lenders that are using our service. And because you can use these different phone numbers, they have different numbers for each real estate partner that they're working with. They feed the leads into this, and then they follow up in using CallAction, but in a tag team kind of format, really, trying to set up that showing appointment to get the conversation going. And then once they get the call back or the lender is able to kind of interact with that customer, they segue into, have you been pre-qualified and those kind of things, try and book the appointment for the real estate agent and then keep that real estate agent in flow. That way, if you're making the investment buying leads, you're kind of doing a two-party attack on those leads, which is going to increase the likelihood of conversion. What we find from this, because lenders that are using our services are going to tend to be a little bit more consistent than the real estate agent or the team, is that if you can warm up that lead and hand off the appointment, you've really strengthened that relationship with your realtor partner at that point in time. Because ultimately that's what they're hoping to try and accomplish. And you've eliminated a lot of the hard work that, in terms of that initial consistency of setting an appointment. And so we're finding lenders that are pretty savvy are buying our service. And then if they're already making that lead spend, they're just feeding those leads into the system, tweaking their outbound follow-up processes and automating that to create more consistency and then are dramatically increasing the ROI on that lead spend for both themselves and with the real estate agent. And obviously earning some favors with the real estate agent, because one of the side benefits of that is that then that agent tells somebody else in the office, like, hey, I got this great lender. He helps me follow up with my leads. And then all of a sudden you start picking up more and more and more, and it starts to snowball on itself. So we're seeing some people do some pretty good things with that process.
That's brilliant, but yet so obvious. It's like you should be doing it. And you're right. I mean, I think you said it, consistency and follow-up is just not something that most humans are just good at. And
exactly.
So why not try to find a service like yours that will do it for you, basically? Because that's brilliant. That's a golden goose. Relationships trump all. I say that all the time. But at the end of the day, you still have to execute. If another lender, even though you might have the best relationship with a real estate agent, if another lender is willing to write checks and is driving leads to a real estate agent, that is one area that it's hard to ignore that other lender. It's hard to ignore them. And that's
exactly.
Got to be on your A game.
Because, at the end, that's a business decision for the real estate agent as well. So if they feel like they're getting a better ROI from that business decision, although the relationships are equal, if they're offsetting a lead spend, then it's going to make sense, because a business decision, you're going to need to kind of respect that and follow that route, because everyone associates a direct correlation between more leads equals more conversions. Yeah, some of the other stuff that we've done with lenders too, it doesn't necessarily involve money. It could involve time. We've had lenders that are using our services, and what they're doing is going after the for sale by owners and developing a relationship using a CallAction phone number with some signage, because all of the CallAction phone numbers are basically a call capture phone number at the same time. And so they're creating some signage for the for sale by owner saying, hey, we'll help you pre-qualify all of these leads, develop the relationship. And then, 30 to 60 days down the line, if that for sale by owner hasn't sold, that lender has the relationship and now can hand off a listing back to his real estate agent partner. And that's something that is really, really powerful. And we've seen some good success with people that are taking that really seriously as well. So
expand on that a little bit more. So you're talking about as a way from our lender or for a real estate agent to generate FSBO leads?
Right now, there's some services out there where you can buy a list of people that are selling their property for sale by owner. And you're still getting some real estate community that are trying to work on converting those, just like they work expireds or anything else. But if you get a copy of that list, what happens is we're seeing some of our people, and we're kind of coaching them on this, is, get the FSBO list from the real estate agent, because when the agent makes the phone call to the FSBO, their guards are really high up, because they're saying like, listen, I'm trying to sell my house for sale by owner because I'm trying to avoid working with you. So I don't want to talk to you at all. Approaching it from a lender point of view, is significantly easier because their guard is a little bit further down and the value proposition is one of win-win, because the lender can say, listen, I'm not here to list your home for sale. It's not going to cost you anything, but whoever is going to buy your home does need to be pre-qualified for a mortgage. And you want to make sure that, you're not letting people in who don't have the capability of purchasing your home. So as in a favorable exchange for both of us, I will take away the load of you handling all of the phone calls. I will pre-qualify everyone for you and give you only the qualified individuals for you to basically work with. Now, the win-win for the lender is a couple different ways. A, you get to pre-qualify a bunch of buyers. Some of those buyers may not necessarily purchase that for sell by owner. So there are leads that you can create and then basically hand off to other parties. Secondly, the other thing that you're going to surface through that is that you're going to get the most aggressive real estate agents, the ones that are really working hard and hustling, are calling those FSBOs. So now as a lender, it helps you get in front of those agents and kind of start establishing those relationships, because now you have a mutual target that both of you are working on. So it's really easy to create a win-win from that. And then, once you're kind of all said and done with that, if the for sale by owner tires out, then you can refer them back to your realtor partner and convert that into a listing further down line. There's lots of little wins in there that are mutually beneficial for everyone that is basically involved. Our help docs are basically public. So if you go to help.callaction.co and you just do a search for sell by owner, or even a Google search if you just do for sell by owner, CallAction.co, we have some detailed help articles and kind of sample signs and some scripting. It's all basically in there in terms of this technique to help you try and convert some leads and generate them for free. Nothing is for free, so it's basically, an investment of time, but that investment of time can scale pretty well versus an investment of $1.
Absolutely. So this is fascinating. And I know, again, we're in the Midwest, you're on the West Coast. It always feels like the coasts are a few years ahead of us. But, automation is a very popular term nowadays, and this is automation to a T. I mean, this is so many real estate agents and mortgage companies that are investing in leads, but not doing a damn thing about follow-up or doing a very poor job of it. This is an answer to that problem.
Yeah, for sure. What we see is that buying leads, it solves the first part of the equation, which is, consistency in lead flow. And now the next thing that we need to do is get consistency in follow-up. And when you get consistency in follow-up, then you get consistency in conversions. And those converted leads then become your sphere of influence. And so you're converting what was originally an online lead into now past closing, which then becomes a sphere of influence because you created a great experience through consistency. And now what's beautiful about that is that those online leads, because they are active online, will amplify your message of referring you through their circle of friends, usually online again through Facebook and things like that. And so it creates this very virtuous circle. So it's getting past that initial hump in terms of, this psychology of thinking like, man, these online leads are no good, they're flighty and, don't convert. It's just a matter of, that consumer's trying to accomplish a task. And if you don't connect with them at that moment in time, then basically you're going to move on. And the example that I like to use all of the time is, you might have a real estate agent who has a customer that walks into their office. They need to get a pre-qualification letter instantly, because they needed to make that offer, and that customer is ready to write the offer. And that real estate agent has relationship with his A lender and his B lender. His A lender is the guy who's spending money on Zillow, is partnered up, they go out, they have drinks together, like they've done business together over and over and over. And then the B lender is pretty much the same guy, but for whatever reason, he likes the A guy a little bit better. If he calls the A guy at this peak state of interest, and he needs that pre-qualification letter and A doesn't answer, oftentimes you're going to instantly hang it up, no questions asked, and go to B. And this is because you have that sense of urgency and you're trying to accomplish the task, which is the pre-qualification letter. lenders often have the same kind of experiences with any of the services that you need too, whether, it's title, escrow, or appraisal, or anything like that, or a credit cleaning guy. You call that first one, and if you can't get an answer right away, you'll instantly hang up and kind of move on. And this is just human nature nowadays. It's just the mobile device has totally changed our behavior. If you just think of this, the iPhone, it's less than 10 years old, but what has it replaced? Right? It's a flashlight, a camera, a clock, a calendar, an email device, an internet browser, all in one device. All of those industries have been impacted, to not really take a hard look at in terms of how this device has changed our behavior, is to basically go down a fool's road, basically, because it's that instant gratification at your fingertip for just about anything and everything you can imagine is what's changed people. It's changed their behavior, and we want it, and we want it now. And we want it on our own terms, because we know that if we don't get it in that moment on our own terms, all we need is one other Google search, and then we can find somebody else who will provide it instantly.
That's brilliant. What you just said is your customers, they want it, and they want it now. So you need to be able to give it, and give it now.
Exactly. And everyone has reasonable expectation the moment that you've created that relationship. Everyone relates to being on the other end of that phone as well, basically, meaning being the person that's delivering the service. Difference is that when we have 5 or 6 or 10 minutes of that mental bandwidth, and you think like, okay, today is the day that I'm going to accomplish this task, and you jump both feet in, you want to go in and out and get it done as quickly as possible. And that's where that peak sense of urgency that you will keep trying to accomplish the goal that you want. And that's when you want it, and want it now. Once you have the relationship established, and at that point, they're going to totally work with you and kind of, if you say, hey, give me an hour, give me 2 hours, people are still reasonable in their expectations. And if they don't know you and it's cold turkey, then they're going to keep moving until they find someone who's going to deliver it for them at that moment in time, just because that's when we have that mental bandwidth to accomplish that. And, that's the zone that we try and play in and try and focus on, because that consumer behavior is not going to change. The sales industry, I think as a whole, needs to understand is that we're going from sales to service. It's about creating an experience at the other end. If you talk to any of your past clients and you ask them what their interest rate was as a mortgage lender, 99.9% of them are not going to remember 30 days later, right? But they will have fought you tooth and nail over an eighth of a rate, right? An eighth of a point. But if you discuss about the experience, they're always going to remember that. And if you think about the experience, an experience is something that service delivers. And what's different is that when we create good service by being available and meeting the customer's need and meeting their expectations, those are the first experiences that someone has. And when you accomplish that positive reinforcement, then they're going to work with you, because that is a path of least resistance in trying to find somebody else that can deliver it again.
Right.
So fulfilling that initial need that that customer is trying to accomplish by being responsive day one is the first level of building trust, building rapport. If I get into my car and I turn the switch on a day that's 32 degrees and the car doesn't start, I lost trust in the car, right? And if you think about it, if I pick up the phone to call a business and they don't answer, I lost a little bit of trust. It doesn't mean that they're not going to call back, but that initial little feeling puts a little bit of doubt, like, are they really going to call me back? Are they really going to be responsive? And so the more that we can, right from the very beginning, accomplish all of those levels of trust by being responsive and answering those phone calls, then it's a lot easier to create that experience that they're going to remember. And that's what they're going to refer you on, is that experience that they remember. If it was positive, or conversely, if it was negative, it's going to be either or.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jesse, this has been fantastic. This is awesome information. This is something that I don't think enough people know enough about. We all know about Zillow. We all know about LendingTree. We all know about how to buy leads. We don't know how to convert them very well. And we don't know how to automate the process as well, or at least not enough people do. And more people need your service. Tell them how they can get a hold of you, how they can find you, and what the next steps would be.
So the easiest would be to visit our website. So you can go to CallAction. So that's CallAction.co. So CallAction.co is our basic website. You'll find all of our pricing and everything directly on there. We have all of our help docs that shows workflows and how to use the service are available at CallAction.co. And then also we have a blog where we talk a lot about this kind of lead conversion, and we do webinars and kind of have these discussions to try and educate people about the process. And you can find that at blog.callaction.co. So all of it's available directly from the website if you just look in navigation. But that's kind of where you can find some stuff like that. I also do some speaking events kind of around the country occasionally. So every once in a while you can find me that way. And
You're on social media, you're on Facebook, Twitter.
Exactly. And under CallAction on all of that stuff, or under Jesse, last name Beaudoin, Beaudoin, because we want to try and pronounce that one.
Love it. And I see here that you do offer a free trial. So anybody who wants to give this a shot, there is an opportunity to try it for free. This would be a highly recommended service in today's day and age, especially in a day and age where the Zillows of the world are quote unquote taking over, and you need them. And so you need to be able to implement and execute better so that, like you said, you're establishing that rapport, you're establishing that highest level of service from day zero, really.
Exactly. From the first, 3 to 5 minutes, you're starting to build rapport because, they sent in an inquiry and you responded quickly to that inquiry. So you're catching them when they have that mental bandwidth and are currently in peak sense of urgency or peak state of mind, like they're in flow thinking about that. So it's significantly easier for you to connect with them at that point. Then you come across as being highly responsive, which basically builds trust. And then the goal is to, try and go deep in that first interaction with that particular person, because that's how you're going to, build trust, build rapport, and people only do business with who they know, like, and trust. So that's the first steps, basically, is just achieving those goals. So
100 million %. That is awesome. Jesse, I really appreciate it. That is callaction.co. Go check it out. This has been phenomenal content, Jesse. I look forward to staying in touch and talking more about our business. Look forward to seeing you at the next mastermind and the next event, because you are obviously a wealth. You are a guru of this knowledge, and I really appreciate you being on today.
I very much appreciate that. I don't know if I'm a guru more so than just a consistent student, because nobody ever achieves a yogi status, in my opinion. We just have to be consistent students and really be thinking ahead. But, conversations like this with professionals like you give us the opportunity to process that mentally and up our game. And I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. And we'll be talking to you very soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much, sir.
If you're looking to elevate your business, aligned with continual innovation and evolution, Jeff wants to talk to you. Go to FitzerMortgageTeam.com and connect with him today.